Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Reasonable Doubt. It is Thursday night, 8 p.m., and I am your host, Jimmy Ardoin, along with my co-host, Julio Vela. JV, what's going on tonight, man?
Hey, man. Go Stros. What's the score there? What happened?
I don't know. I mean, I'm glad we're off to a good baseball start, but
Hey.
I think they're...
You know, people are picking them to go all the way.
I don't like that. It's a curse, man. The Sports Illustrated cover is a curse. It always is.
It's like the Madden.
It's like
right?
the Madden cover.
You get on
That's
the
right.
cover, you get injured.
But I am excited.
I'm excited,
I'm
too.
excited for that season. I'm also excited tonight because we have two great guests with us tonight. First, he is the master of the bow tie and also the 5 o'clock shadow. Brent Mayr, how are you, my friend?
Doing well, thank you very much.
Glad to have you here. Glad to have you here. And our other guest tonight, of course, is Allison Jackson.
Hello.
You're back.
I'm back at last.
Allison how long did you spend over there?
About 18 months.
18 months in Palau.
That's
You
right.
were a public defender in Palau. We're going to hear all about her story coming up a little later in the show. She's going to share with us what it's like to be a public defender in a third world country. I'm looking forward to that story.
I think not just any public defender, the chief public defender, right?
I was the chief public defender for most of my stint there.
We're going to get into that. So let's hold that thought. I want to get into that story, but we are going to take your calls tonight, ladies and gentlemen, starting around 8:30. We'll open up the phone line. 713-807-1794 is the number. We'll flash it up at the bottom of the screen. When we get to that time, we'll also be taking your comments right here on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. You can also post some comments on Facebook. Our Facebook page has all the stories we'll be covering tonight. So please go there, take a look at our topics, and if you want to jump in the conversation, join us right here. First off, guys, I want to get to some local stories going on right now. And interesting one I came across was U of H students are protesting the university over investing in private prisons. And Julio, we've talked about this before, the inherent conflict that comes with running a private prison and how a lot of lawmakers and other people that are heavily invested in the criminal justice system are also invested in private prisons. They have a vested interest in ensuring that this cycle continues. And good for the U of H students. They stood up this week and asked the university to divest itself because as some of you may know or you may not know, these universities have investment funds, and they go out there and they invest in several different portfolios, and turns out that one of these portfolios is private prisons, lo and behold. So I think this is a very good story. I don't know what effect it'll have, but guys, there's a lot of money in public universities, and it is kind of shameful in a way when you think about it that our public education dollars are being used to help fund public prisons. It's really shocking to me.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the old, it's all the same team. You follow the money, and the money will take you and show you what it's all really about. And it's shocking, but at the same time, we should have known.
There's a buck to be made.
Yeah, there's a dollar to be made. There's bodies to be put in, and so let's fill them up. And if there's going to be a change, it's going to be these young people.
Does it matter, guys, that some of these funds are maybe kind of blind funds and that they don't know exactly what they're investing in? I mean, I don't think there's any suggestion that the Board of Regents from U of H said, I want to go out and specifically invest in private prisons. But do you think there's maybe a duty of them to kind of figure out where the money's going?
Absolutely, I think so. And I think one of the interesting things about this story was that it involved two students who were doing a school project that were just looking into what some of these funds even were, what it meant to invest in these kind of funds, and they were the ones who discovered that these funds, I don't think the Board of Regents had any idea, but I think it's pretty clear that they should have. That our city funds that. My tax dollars fund U of H. They have $1 billion a year budget, and I think we should absolutely hold them accountable. If they were funding a white supremacist group, we would definitely be holding them accountable too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And that's exactly what I thought about, is that, what would this be like if it was supporting something like a white supremacist group? Going back to your question, yes, I think as a public institution that is charged with educating young minds and receiving public fundings, yes, I think they do. This isn't a private company or an investment fund that's charged with making money, okay? Granted, the school has got to fund itself, but it's got to do it responsibly. And I think it's commendable what these students are doing. It's something that I also noticed was being done by other universities, because by students at other universities, because apparently University of Houston was not the only one doing it, but yay for them getting out there and doing that. I think the university should have been a little bit more cautious about that. Thankfully, it was something like this and not something worse. You can imagine the public outcry if they found out that they were investing in something much, much more objectionable. Not to minimize that this, I agree with you, private prisons and that everything behind it is unconscionable, but it definitely is good to see them out there fighting it.
Out in Palau, did they have private prisons out there? Do you know?
No, there's one jail/prison, and it is built to house about 50 inmates, and the population is about 100 inmates at any given time, and it's totally run by the government. I mean, what funding it gets about, when I was there, I think the numbers were about $700 a month to support 100 inmates.
But you know, we saw the story up in, I think it was Pennsylvania, where the judge was basically on the juvenile cases, where he essentially had a backdoor kickback deal for every juvenile he sent to this private facility.
Didn't he make like $1 million or something?
Yeah, I mean,
$1 million in kickbacks and sending little souls to juvenile private detention centers.
Yeah, I mean, this just goes. It goes to show that having private prisons is such a bad idea, because the potential for abuse is so bad. Is what gets me. You have people making money off of imprisoning people, so you don't have really a motivation to lessen sentences or to even find diversion programs. I know we've talked a lot about, you know, the DA's office finding different kind of diversion programs, but when people start setting up private prisons and housing people in private prisons, there's a buck to be made there.
There's no incentive to rehabilitate.
No.
They want the repeat customer. They want the repeat person. As we know, I mean, a lot of the private prisons and detention centers deal with immigration stuff too. And so you have these individuals who it's a revolving door.
And there was a big article, and this was maybe a year ago or so, about a private juvenile immigration facility that was being built here in the Houston area. And that that's a scary thought, because we've seen what's gone on down at the border with how they've housed some of the people coming across there and detained them. I mean, the potential for abuse with this is so bad.
I could just, for personal experience, I'm actually involved in a lawsuit against a private company that's charged with running a juvenile facility here in Texas. My client was severely injured at this facility because there was no monitoring, there was no supervision. So it's just, I can say firsthand, I've experienced it, I've seen it with my client. It needs to be fixed. There needs to be more regulation, and by these students, you know, getting their voice out there and taking up this cause, I think is it's a good small step in that direction. But we do need to do a lot more in terms of making the public more aware of all the problems that occur within these private prisons.
Well, and look, we can't even fix the public jails and prisons. You know, look at the conditions at the Harris County Jail. I mean, they continue to be a mess. And just, to me, at this point, Houston's an embarrassment on the criminal justice system in that regard, in the sense that we are constantly having people die in custody at the Harris County Jail. And for what? I mean, this latest lawsuit involved, you know, a 30-year-old male, or almost, I guess, 29 years old, so right about 30. He was a Baylor graduate. I mean, the kid, I looked up the case in the system. It was a drug case. It was a felony drug case. But, you know, it didn't look like the kid was out there being a drug dealer, from what I could tell. I mean, this was a kid who had an education, and I don't know where the wheels went off with him, but he certainly didn't deserve to die in the custody of the Harris County Sheriffs. That was a mess. And if we can't fix those problems, where do we even begin to start with the problems of the private prisons?
Last I checked, if you get arrested in Houston, there should be a 0 chance of you dying while you're in custody. Now, later on, the government wants to put you to death in some other type of proceeding. That's something different. But by just getting arrested, you shouldn't, one of the thoughts in your mind shouldn't be, oh my God, I might die. You know, and I think that says a lot about the conditions in the jail. I think the individual died from meningitis, which he was put in a pod that had, 10 or 20 other individuals in the pod. And as you can imagine, you don't get to sleep privately or use the toilet privately. People are using the same and touching the same things, and I mean it's just rampant for an outbreak in there. And something has to be done. What was your experience out in Palau?
Actually, the jail there was worse than the Harris County Jail. You've never seen anything like this in your entire life. One of the major things, I guess, that I got involved with there was there were solitary confinement facilities there. They called them the dark rooms. And basically it was about a 6 foot by 8 foot, generously 8 foot cell that has no drainage in the floor. There's no toilet, there's no bedding, there's nothing. It's a concrete box. Palau is a tropical island nation, and it's very hot, and there's no ventilation. So it's basically just like in the pleadings, I wrote sweltering torture box because that's what it was. And people were being held there for sometimes months at a time.
Wow.
And so that was some of the habeas litigation that I was involved in when I got there.
And explain what a habeas litigation is, and what was the outcome of that?
Well, so habeas litigation, basically, a writ of habeas corpus means bring me the body, right? Like, this guy might have a legitimate charge against him, but bring me his body. Bring me his body. Like, you're not
alive,
causing him.
let's be clear.
Alive,
Alive.
yeah,
Alive,
right.
alive.
And so basically the outcome of that was we litigated it in front of the judge. The judge was actually a United States judge who had been over there on a contract for the last several years. He was very liberal. I think he didn't really understand the conditions of the jail until he actually went and saw them. John Bradley was the attorney who represented the Republic in that case. And the judge ordered us to go with him to look at at my client's cell that he had been held in.
And so the judge was exposed to this cell, and I'd imagine there was body waste everywhere.
There was. So since they only let him out about once a week to shower, and my client had been in there for I think he had been in there for a little over, at that time, 3 weeks. He was about 110 pounds. He was 19 years old. And the reason I knew something was wrong was because he was shivering when we were in court, and there's no air conditioner. It was about 85 degrees. And he was really cold because he had been in a 100-degree squalid torture box for 3 weeks. So Bradley argued that these conditions were not cruel and unusual, and that he had seen the facilities. And the judge told him, well, for ex parte reasons, Ms. Jackson's going, you're going to have to come with us. So we went, and there were bags of feces all over the floor because the guards would just throw in like plastic grocery bags for my clients to use the bathroom in. There was a large bottle full of urine. And that's how they lived, in abject darkness all the time.
And so they'd get to shower once a week.
If they had the facility, that was one of the arguments that I had with the jail was you guys have a whole bunch of rules about how you're supposed to do this, and you're not even doing this basic minimum. You're supposed to let him out for an hour a day, and you're calling my client this escape risk, and he's 110 pounds. You can't keep track of one 110-pound kid long enough to let him out to use the restroom, long enough to let him out to walk around for an hour a day.
And so eventually what happened?
Eventually, the judge ordered my client out of the dark rooms and issued a 30-page opinion calling the dark rooms absolutely unconscionable, inhumane, cruel, and unusual, and all these other things. And the opinion is actually quite fantastic.
So, I think he took Mr. Bradley to task on
a little bit, yeah. And so, and then after that, we entered into an agreement with the Attorney General's office. The second in command there was a much more reasonable attorney. His name was Mike Todd, and he was very concerned about the human rights aspect of this. And so after Bradley kind of was less involved, Mike Todd took over, and we entered into an agreement that they wouldn't house anyone in those facilities anymore. And then they remodeled the entire facility, and now they're using it. They put in bedding, they put in lighting, they put in showers and toilets, and now they're using it as like a maximum security facility instead of a solitary confinement. So right now in the Republic, there's not any solitary confinement.
So because of you and your office, you've eliminated this practice in the Republic of Palau.
We had an excellent judge, and we also had some really excellent courthouse staff that were absolutely imperative in writing this beautiful opinion that the judge wrote.
But at what point does this stop? I mean, at what point do we say, you know, enough's enough? It's time that people don't die in jail because of neglect. I mean, certainly people are going to die in jail because they might have a health issue, or they might go in a bad situation. And look, there may be some situations that are unavoidable, but when you read this lawsuit about Patrick Green, and you read some of the other lawsuits that have been filed here recently, these weren't people who went in with a situation. And I know people who go in and they got kidney problems. I know people who go in and you know, they don't get the right medication. It worsens their situation. They're prevented from seeing a doctor. But the facts of what happened to Patrick Green, as pled in his family's petition, are just they're deplorable. They really are. I mean, the deputies over there completely neglected him, and it was clear. I mean, inmates were asking for help.
They lifted up his body
Right.
and held his body to the window saying, look at how sick this guy is. And then he collapsed to the floor and they still didn't come over.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is like high drama, you know? I mean, I can't imagine.
I don't know what the fix is. I mean, when does the DOJ step back in and and do something? I mean, apparently our local officials don't want to do anything. You know, the county commissioners aren't stepping up and saying, this is an embarrassment to us. We can't have this anymore. And here's what we're going to do to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen. I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything from any of the county commissioners on this. Have you?
Well, I mean, find me a county commissioner who's going to gain votes, or a county judge who's going to gain votes, or a sheriff who's going to gain votes. Everyone who's got control over that jail is got a political stake in the game, and
Right.
that's the real problem. And as long as you have that, it's never going to be politically popular to do something that's going to benefit inmates. You know, bring the DOJ in, stick them in there where there is no, where the DOJ is the only one that doesn't really have a political interest in it. Then you might see some change. But that's the real problem here, and it's not just here in Harris County. It's in county jails all over the state of Texas. I see it when I go to other locations. You hear about deplorable conditions, and sheriffs have got so much on their plate to deal with, and then to have to deal with the jail, but then also worry about getting reelected in November. It's just never, as long as it's not politically popular, you're never going to really start to see effective change unless you get some outside.
But does it only become politically popular, let's say, if somebody who's a big donor, if their kid gets popped for possession of marijuana, goes into the jail, and in the 48 hours it takes them to bond out, they die?
Yeah.
I mean, is that what it's going to take?
It's sad to acknowledge that and to give credit to something like that, but maybe that's what it takes, because again, without not seeing that it is, seeing that it just happens over and over and over again, and it just seems like as long as I've been practicing that you just keep hearing this over and over and over again. I mean, years ago I remember it happening, and last year it happened, this happens this year. You hear about it happening with your clients, and yeah, you can talk, sometimes you can talk with some of the jail staff, you can talk with some of the sergeants and captains, but at the end of the day, nothing is being changed, nothing is being created to fix the problem.
But I remember, and maybe it has to be more than 2 years ago now, because it was then Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst. One of his, either a child of a friend of his or a friend of his, got jammed up, I think, up in Collin County in the jail, and they released the phone calls of him trying to get favors to get that person out. I mean, literally, would it take somebody like a connection to the lieutenant governor dying in a jail in order for us to to get change,
Well,
meaningful change anyway.
Even then, the question is it going to get the lieutenant governor reelected or not? That's the bottom line. And I mean, it's not like you have a situation like that in Palau.
Yeah.
But it just unless you have, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the private prisons. Unless there was some financial incentive for them to provide good conditions, you've got to get good ratings from all the inmates or to get the bonuses.
Yeah.
Unless there's some incentive to those people who are working, nothing is going to happen.
I'm sure they're not sending out rate your experience cards. Answer these survey questions on your way out the door.
They should have a Yelp review, right?
Yeah, Yelp review of the Harris County.
Oh, it's fun to read those sometimes on Google and whatnot. People will actually write.
Maybe we could set one up. Maybe we could set up like the Harris County Jail review on Yelp and have people start reviewing it.
Well, and it comes on the heels of the sheriff cutting staff, cutting people who can work at the jails, and cutting time, and not having proper review of their own internal standards, and it's just something that continuously happens over and over and over, and it's a thought of dying in the Harris County Jail shouldn't be one that crosses one's mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's death when you're arrested, other than for a death penalty offense. Seems a little bit absurd to me.
So I wonder if one could use the offense upon getting arrested, if you could then resist that arrest, because not necessarily because the arrest is unlawful, but just because it's necessary to do so. I'd like to try that one. I might try that when I got nothing else. I might reach out for that one.
We might reach out for that. Brent, I'm glad you're here this week because we talked last week about the Houston Forensic Science Center and all the problems going on over there. And I know I think you had a hearing last week on some issues.
I didn't have a hearing.
Oh, I thought I misunderstood.
The Todd Leffler had a hearing.
Okay.
I assisted with the investigation of what he was trying to do, but basically just.
And let me set the scene for the audience a little bit because last week we had talked about some issues that the Houston Forensic Science Center, the Houston Crime Lab, which they rebranded it and still, and I had their Twitter. Did I forward you the Twitter?
I don't think I saw the Twitter.
Oh, the Twitter page was great. Where was it? They put up on their Twitter page, happy 2nd anniversary HFSC, so much progress and innovation in only 2 years. And I just read that and thought, that's the most oxymoronic statement there possibly could be because nothing has changed. From what I've seen, they just slapped a couple badges on some cars and got some fancy artwork. I mean, we talked last week about the problems with the DWI cases that existed, that they basically conceded, yeah, we got some testing problems, we need to clean it up. But they didn't concede they needed to clean it up till just recently. And now the latest is the continued backlog of rape kits that have gone untested, and God knows within that backlog what problems you're going to find within that once they start to unwinding. I did see that the mayor came out and said this has to be solved by June. I think he set a deadline for it to be done. But so that's kind of the issue we have going on percolating, which leads us to your hearing, Brent.
Well, essentially, it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. They've had problems for so long. Whether it's the rape kits, whether it's forensic toxicology testing on these DWI cases, understaffing, personnel issues have just led to sloppy forensic work. And essentially what's been happening with the latest and with this hearing is the fact that the Houston Forensic Science Center is continuing to not disclose and not turn over information related to the testing of individuals' blood in DWI investigations. What came out in this hearing is that there were a number of cases, including one of mine, where individuals' blood was tested, a problem arose, they had to throw out all the testing, everyone's blood was retested, and of course, did they tell anyone about this problem? Absolutely not. It happened on one of my cases. Fortunately, I was able to have my client was acquitted at trial and never became an issue, but Todd Leffler had it the same situation happen, and went to a judge and said, you know what, Judge, I want you to do something extraordinary. I want you to throw out this evidence because they turned over nothing pertaining to this testing problem where they had to throw out 50 or so different blood samples, retest in order to have to retest blood. They did nothing to disclose these problems. There were no corrective action reports, and the judge said she's convinced. And in a very, very unusual move, the judge ordered that the evidence was going to be suppressed, was not going to let the state use the blood evidence in Todd Loeffler's case. It's a great win on his part. It was a great decision by Judge Harris, the judge in that case. But man, oh man, does it just highlight that the Houston Forensic Science Center is continuing to hide evidence, to not disclose problems that they're having there in the crime lab, and lack of personnel just contributes to that and other problems like with the rape kits.
How did you find out about bad tests? Because that's always the conundrum that I've felt like on this show is that when somebody hides something from you, how the hell do you know about it?
You talk about a needle in a haystack. We had a very good forensic toxicologist working with us, going through the records and able to sort of piece together from other records that were provided to us. We would see how, for instance, my client's blood was removed from an evidence locker on one day, but there's no record as to what they did with it on that day. And then it gets returned to the refrigerator, and then a week later, it gets pulled out, it's tested, and then the results are, it goes through the regular process. But we're like, well, how come it came out of the lab a week before with no documentation? And so we start digging and putting pieces together, and just adding up all the pieces, we find out, sure enough, that's what happened. Todd Loeffler gets one of the lab directors on the stand in the hearing last week and gets him to concede. Yeah, we had problems. Yes, we failed to document the problems that existed. Yes, we failed to turn that over when we had a court order telling us to turn over anything regarding any mistesting, any problems with testing. Just we had him pinned in because we were able to get all of the records and piece these records together with these records and establish that, yeah, this is exactly what had happened, and it was never disclosed to the defense.
I want to take a pause there because we do have a phone call coming. I want to jump over the phone line and get it real quick. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt. Thanks for calling.
Hi. It sounds like you've got just a really rich cast of attorneys there, and I'm not able to follow the conversation. I'm on Ubers.
Oh.
I can't see. But my question is pedestrian, really. I mean, I would like to speak to whatever I didn't hear, but in any case, if I'm arrested and I go to one of the substations and have a probable cause hearing with the magistrate, with the DA, the assistant DA, and the policeman, can I have my attorney with me at that time there, or would he or she be refused entry?
Well, funny you should ask that because this has been an issue that's come up recently here in Harris County. So despite not having sound, you actually have a very on-point question for stuff going on here in Harris County. This has been a big deal. And we'll take a little long-winded way to answer your question, caller, but there is a magistrate courthouse in the bottom floor of the courtroom at the courthouse downtown, and one of the issues that has been coming up is whether or not people who come into that court should have their lawyer present. A lot of people can't get their lawyer present there because they're arrested in the middle of the night. They're arrested at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and most attorneys are not going to answer the phone, get out of bed, and come down there at 3 in the morning. And so one of the arguments that's been going around is that should the public defender have somebody there on standby to be able to represent people as they come in? I mean, it happens in federal court where at least when a person is brought in and has an initial appearance, there is at least the public defender there if they want to proceed on an initial appearance before the person either can hire counsel or formally is appointed counsel. So that's one of the issues that's been going around. And yeah, you do have a right to have it, but practically speaking, I think most of these magistrate judges, they're not going to wait around for you to get a lawyer there, right, guys?
That's been my experience, both as a prosecutor and a defense attorney. Trying to get into that room as a defense attorney, you're going to have a difficult time. Practically, it's very difficult for it to occur. The real concern is how often unrepresented individuals will do things harmful to their case and then have a DA pull the tapes from those probable cause hearings to use evidence of whatever that person is saying. Just to have someone there to say, hey, buddy, keep your mouth shut, don't say anything, would be invaluable. It would be essential to upholding someone's rights under those circumstances. But practically speaking, yeah, the system is designed to keep defense lawyers out, and it's very, very difficult. And all you can do is just hope that your client keeps their mouth shut, gets through the system, and then fight your day in court, because in that magistrate hearing, it's very, very difficult. I'd like to see the change. I think having a PD representative there would be the best thing, but I see a long, difficult road ahead in making that change occur.
Yeah, great. No, that's a great question by the caller.
Are there any pushes or movements towards having that in Fort Bend?
Well, in Fort Bend, we're very small. We were only a mental health office for the last 6 years, and there were 4 attorneys. And now that we have a trial division, we've added 4 more attorneys. So it's still a very small office, and right now we just don't have the funding or the ability to put somebody there.
I think Brent's exactly right, that a lot of times just saying, dude, shut up, don't say anything, please, can go a long way.
Worth its weight in gold.
Well, and a lot of times those individuals who are getting arrested and going before a magistrate don't know what they can and can't do, should or shouldn't do, and they're thinking, oh, well, let me just talk to the judge and I can sort this whole thing out. Mm-hmm. When in reality, you know, that's not good most of the time. That's not good. You know, I had one kid, for example, he was 17 years old. He gets arrested. He gets 1 court date, 2 court date, 3 court date, until I'm finally appointed to him. And it takes me 2 seconds. I look in the file, and it's Benadryl. He's arrested for possession of Benadryl, right? And somebody at the PC court or the PC should have caught this and said, hey, it's Benadryl. It says Benadryl, and the information says codeine. Okay, Benadryl is not codeine, so this guy needs to just go home. And it took 2 or 3 months, and then finally for me to come in and take 2 seconds to realize, hey, this is a bogus charge.
Yeah.
And that can be prevented with an individual at the PC court.
Yeah, it can. That was a great call. We got another call coming in. I want to jump on the phone line again. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hi, my name is Pete. I want to ask you guys' opinion on the latest election and our Republican candidates and how you think that they would affect the criminal justice system, because we have some people right now that, like Mr. Trump, that are okay with people attacking each other at the rallies and not telling them to stop, and someone that's also okay with making comparisons like his wife to Mr. Cruz's wife, and that's just making the people more and more angry. So I want to know what you guys think of this man, because he very well could be our next, the one for the Republican Party, and the one that could be the president for the next 4 years. Like, can you really picture him doing a State of the Union, without being violent?
Well,
he keeps saying he can be presidential, but I don't personally believe that he can. It's all a show for him to be in the media for free all the time.
Well, thanks for the question. We appreciate you calling in. Thankfully, guys, in terms of the local level, I don't think if Trump did get elected, or whoever gets elected, I don't think they would have a huge impact locally because of the way our system is set up. I think that the local politicians do exert a lot more control over the criminal justice system here, and I don't think that, frankly, from my standpoint, I don't see Trump or any of the other candidates really being able to affect our local issues. It might affect policy on, at a federal level as to, who becomes the next attorney general. Obviously, the next president is going to probably have 3, maybe 4 appointments to make to the Supreme Court. So in that regard, that's where it might affect the criminal justice system, in my opinion. Guys, what do you think?
I think I respectfully disagree. I think electing someone like Donald Trump would greatly affect the criminal justice system.
Yes,
in the sense that the vitriol that he has spewed and the atmosphere that he's created, I think is going to cause.
It might create more customers of the criminal justice system.
And that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
That's where I think you're going to see a real impact of someone, because I agree with you in the sense that really whoever our next president is going to be is not going to affect the way that judges hand down sentences or prosecutors prosecute cases. We've all been doing this long enough to know, especially in federal court, Republican, Democrat, Attorney General is going to go after who they're going to go after.
Right.
But
he's gonna look at the police department as like a new revenue stream that he's gonna try to double or triple sales, just by arresting more people and getting all those sorts of attacks from our own population and citizens.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it goes back to the topic we were talking about earlier, which I'd have to do a little bit more research, but I wonder where big private prison money is going to. I mean, where does it go? Is it going to Republican candidates, Democrat candidates, or both? My gut instinct says it's going to both. And but that's a good question, I think.
It's interesting that you brought that up, because I immediately thought that too. Again, I could see, we're talking about the problems with privatization of prisons. You could definitely, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of that with someone like Trump in charge. But again, the problem with them is there's just too many unknowns, I think. So.
Yeah, I mean.
He's only like 500 delegates away from being the nominee.
Get ready for the Apprentice.
950 left.
Apprentice White House version, right?
Oh man.
Yeah, thanks for the call. Good times chatting about it. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Guys, I think that if anything, what this election will do is it's going to bring out a lot. I think we're going to see record number of voters, frankly, which is a good thing, because we always talk about on the show, Julio, if you want to make change, best way to do it is get out and vote. And I think that Trump has prompted a lot of people, good, however you look at it, whether you're angry about him being in the race or you fully support him, I think people are going to get out to the polls and vote. And so it could be a record turnout. We got another call. We're getting calls after call tonight. I want to jump on and get this while we got it. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question, and I was bumped waiting, for your answer on the first call. But my question is, what is the status of the pretrial diversion for small amounts of marijuana? Are the people still getting booked?
Yes. I see a lot of them. Yes, they're still getting booked. I'm still seeing them in the holdovers. I had a guy yesterday or 2 days ago, never been arrested before in his life, is back there, and I'm asking him, "Why are you here? He said, "I don't know. You tell me. You're my lawyer." And I said, "Okay, fair enough." But some of these guys are still slipping through the cracks. They're not getting interviewed by pretrial supervision to get their PR bond so they can get on out and come back to court like someone on the free world. Additionally, some of the agencies are still not abiding by the pretrial supervision, pretrial program. Additionally, for the viewer, there's also a pretrial first offender theft for small amounts of theft. Now they're generally automatic. And it's the same issue. There's some people that aren't getting their PR bonds, and as a result, they're having to cop to something or bond themselves out, or just left in a predicament that's troublesome. The program's still in place. Unfortunately, I'd have to look at all the numbers, but I'm still seeing people in the holdover charged with possession of marijuana who should qualify for programs.
Yeah,
so some people haven't, or some municipalities haven't gotten the memo about what should be done with these small amounts, with these people with small amounts of marijuana.
Oh, I think they've probably gotten the memo. They're probably just ignoring the memo, I think is what's going on.
Well, land of the free, home of the brave, what's going on? I mean, shouldn't they be prosecuted? And who can? I mean, the Texas Rangers aren't they like an extra legal organization that can be? You can point this out to them, and they can come down and they can say, "Yeah, you're right."
Yeah, the problem is you're not entitled to a pretrial diversion, and so they're not violating any law by not following a policy from an elected DA. I mean, this has been the argument that we had going back to when Pat Likas was the DA, where people jumped on her. How can you do this? It's not the law. You're not following the law, and so there's not a law there to be enforced because you don't have a right to a pretrial diversion, unfortunately. So I think that's the problem with that.
This is a suggestion.
No, it's a policy.
The full force and policy of suggestion.
Pretty much.
So whatever she tells us, we have to take it with a grain of salt, or just ignore it, or plan our life around what?
She's set forth a policy. If some agencies choose to ignore it, there's really no legal repercussions for it, unfortunately. I mean, if they choose to ignore the policy that she sets out, all she can do is, bad police agency. And, that's about the best that I can think that they can do, because there's really no legal mechanism to enforce them and compel them to enter into a DA policy.
Well, I mean, she's the one that brings the charges, right? I mean.
Yeah, but there's no charge for not following one of her policies. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but she's not going to represent Galena Park if that's who the offender is in this instance.
Right.
She's not going to.
I'm thinking like what she could do if she was really concerned about it, or maybe she is really concerned about it, maybe she is, but what she could do is tell the district attorneys at the intake to say, hey, look, first chance, and if you don't first chance this guy, if you don't give him this pretrial, this program, I'm just not going to accept this charge.
Yeah.
She could do that. And that'll be a strong hand.
But thanks for the call. We appreciate you. Good question. I want to move on though, guys, to Allison and your story.
Okay.
It is time for us to feature your story. A lot of us, for those who don't know, Allison packed up all her belongings and moved to the small, tiny island nation of Palau to become the chief public defender.
Well, actually, I wasn't hired as the chief public defender.
But you eventually became that.
I did.
And I think there's a lot of romance that people have. And most people couldn't find Micronesia and Palau on a map if they had a seeing eye dog and a search warrant.
Let's be fair. I probably couldn't have either before I got hired there.
Yeah.
So I guess the beginning of it is I was actually a part of the FACT program through Harris County. I was appointed counsel in training. I had graduated from law school. I was doing private practice. I was mostly doing appellate work and parole with a law partner. And we got accepted into future appointed counsel training through the Harris County Public Defender's Office. And that sent 10 young lawyers through the Gideon's Promise training and hooked us up with some really awesome mentors and stuff like that. So the Gideon's Promise training is a 2-week intensive in Birmingham, Alabama, and it was amazing. And then after the first 2 weeks, for the next 3 years, you go back for a weekend. So one of the weekends that I was there, somebody had said, on the listserv for Gideon's Promise, there's this job offer in Palau. And I looked at my law partner and I said, I'm going to apply for this thing. I'm probably not going to get it. I can't imagine why they would want somebody with no public defense experience who's been practicing law for 1.5 years. I'm sure they just get deluged with applicants. And so I emailed that night, it was like midnight, and I emailed Mark Bennett and I said, would you recommend me for this? And he said, if I don't apply for it myself. And I emailed Pat McCann, who had almost the verbatim same response, and Bob Wyckoff, and all three of them sent in letters of recommendation for me. And then I forgot about it. And it was 4 months later that I got an email, and I was walking into my apartment about 2 o'clock in the morning, and my phone dings, and I look down on it, and it's this email from PalauPublicDefender@gmail.com. And it says, are you still interested in an interview? And by then I had kind of forgotten it. I had even applied. You know, I just kind of thought it was a done deal. And so I just looked down at it and I thought, I'm just gonna not agonize about this. If I get I'm gonna take the interview, and if I get the job, I'm gonna take the job, and that's all.
So did you interview over Skype? Because I mean,
It wasn't even over Skype. It was about a 6-minute interview over the phone with the then chief public defender, who was a Palauan woman named Lali Chin, and she was great. And I realized a couple of minutes into the call, she wasn't interviewing me, she was offering me the job. And once I got there, I was kind of like, I still don't really understand why. She had a stack of 70 resumes. And I was certainly not one of the more qualified ones. And she just said, I just had a feeling. So I packed up a couple of Rubbermaid tubs, like mostly just clothes, and shipped it over. It's about a 17-hour flight.
Wow.
I had to Wikipedia it.
Well, and while you were there, you ended some cruel and unusual punishment.
Well, it was really strange, actually. The Texas connections to Palau are interesting.
Strong.
Yeah, so I got there, and about a week after I got there, John Bradley got there, who was the infamous Williamson County DA, who was not involved in the trial level of the Michael Morton prosecution, but was the DA who kept saying, no, we're not going to test the DNA, no, we're not going to test the DNA.
He was the roadblock.
Yeah, he was the roadblock for all those years. So I guess about 6 months before Bradley and I got there, Rick Perry visited.
Really?
He did. Palau, one of the outlying islands that's part of the nation, was the site of one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific Theater in World War II. And so a lot of U.S. politicians kind of go out there. And I think there was some like rumor swirling. Bradley denies this, but there's some rumor swirling that when he went out there, he kind of shook the hand of some people in power and kind of said, hey, I've got this buddy back in Texas who kind of needs a job. And so,
okay.
You know, I'm not saying that's what happened.
I would imagine rumors on a small island nation of 18,000 people spread pretty quickly.
Let me tell you.
Your business is not your own out there.
No, and I think that's one of the things that I'm the happiest about coming back to the States is that I am not in the newspaper every week.
Really? You're big news up there?
Well, because almost all of the cases in Palau are represented by the Public Defender's Office. Everybody is pretty much indigent. Private attorneys in Palau charge about what private attorneys here charge. And so the minimum wage in Palau is $3 an hour. So most people can't afford private counsel. And so our office represented almost all of the cases there. And there's not a lot of news. So the cases are the front page.
What kind of cases would you get? I mean, what?
Oh, we had some of the most amazing cases.
I want to put you on pause. I want to get back to that. We got another call coming. I want to get to our caller before we get through with the program here. Hi, welcome to Reasonable Doubt. Thanks for calling.
Hi. Yeah, I had a problem with depression, and I was let go from my job, and at the time I felt, that was kind of like the end of all things. So I went out to my car and I got a gun and I went back to kind of the entrance of the company and I was going to kill myself. But somebody saw the gun and called the police. I couldn't get the gun to work, obviously, so I ended up being arrested and charged with unlawful use of a weapon or something like that. And they put me in jail and put me in a cell with a plastic thing that's all I had, so I wouldn't somehow hang myself. But I felt the whole thing was improperly done because obviously I needed to go to a hospital and be handled by a doctor. I was seeing a doctor before that for the whole thing, and it took a long time for me to get that whole thing resolved and get off of probation and everything.
Were you screened coming in for mental health issue?
Yeah, I was screened coming in, and I told them about the whole thing, but they still prosecuted me. So I don't know. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. After that, I think Harris County set up something for people that have various mental issues. But I thought that it took a long time for me to deal with it and deal with it through a doctor, not through the criminal system.
Unfortunately, sir, your story is one of very many that we've heard similar like that. I'm sorry that happened to you. I mean, we appreciate you calling in and sharing that with us. We got a question coming in over the internet here for you, Allison. Does Palau still only have 2 total public defenders?
Actually, no. So initially it was me, and I came on as the misdemeanor public defender and the chief. And then about 6 months after I had been there, after I got there, she came into my office and she said, I'm quitting, and so you can either take my job or hire your own boss. And since there are not a lot of lawyers on the island, I was going to have to import somebody from the States most likely. And I just sat there and I thought, I can't risk hiring somebody sight unseen, and I'm just going to take this. So I took it over, and I actually managed to increase the budget. We had a budget. For some reason, the last chief hadn't hired the 3rd attorney, but we had the budget for it. And then I pushed to enlarge the budget to 4. And so we had actually a pretty decent staff. There's about a 20,000 person population in Palau. We had about 1,200 misdemeanors a year and about 200 felonies. And so we had, at the end of my tenure there, we had 3 lawyers up and running, a 4th lawyer on the way to the island, and then an investigator and 2 administrative staff.
I mean, I'm no mathematician. This is why I'm a lawyer. But that seems like a really high percentage of the population getting charged.
Well, some of them are like traffic cases, and they run them through the courts because nobody has insurance. And so you've got to make sure restitution gets paid and stuff like that.
Did you go to trial out there?
Yeah.
Really? Nice.
Yeah, we went to trial a lot. Yeah.
What's that like, trying to find a fair jury on?
Well, so
such a
Palau
small
only
place?
had Palau's only had jury trials for about the last 7 or 8 years because of just that problem. Everybody's related to everybody else. There's like this whole clan system. It's really, really difficult to find a fair jury. And the island is so small. Once something happens, everybody's talking about it. So now you...
Changing venue, I'm sure, is pretty difficult.
Impossible. Guam is 600
Everybody
miles
gets
away.
on boats.
So there've only been a handful of jury trials, maybe 5.
I saw some pictures of you in kayaks on your blog, by the way. Your blog, so I'm imagining, getting kayaking over to the next jurisdiction.
Yeah. So you can have a jury trial now for crimes that carry a sentence of 12 years or more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, this is just fascinating. I mean,
it was a blast.
Brent, can you imagine picking up everything and moving? I mean, both of us, the 3 of us here are married with kids. I can't imagine telling my wife, "Hey, guess what? We're going to Palau. We're picking up and we're going to Palau."
It's a great story. It sounds like it was a great experience, and it's really neat to hear that you were able to really do some great things over there. I'm like Pat saying, "Boy, I'd pick up and go to somewhere like that." I still find it unusual that you didn't look into it before you just sent it in. But yeah, that sounds like an incredible experience. So,
what are some of the things that people don't know? Because a lot of us, we romanticize just packing up your stuff in a Rubbermaid tube and flying halfway across the world in a Rubbermaid, tub.
Same thing.
And flying halfway across the world.
I mean, it's not a resort country. you know? I mean, there are some vacationers there, but there's 2 grocery stores. It's really impossible to get fresh produce. Like, there will just be weeks where there's no lettuce, and that's it. And right now, they're going through one of the worst droughts in history, and it looks like they're probably going to run out of water in the next week. And it's terrible. I was talking to some of my friends who are back there, and they're taking bird baths in the sink because they have water on for an hour a day. And they're having to boil everything before they drink it. You can't drink the tap water there, and right now it's particularly awful. When I was there were water shortages that caused pink eye epidemics, and like our office would like shut down because like we would just post a sign on the door that said, "If you have pink eye, don't come in here. Call me, and we'll reset your court date."
I mean, there's an article today on NACDL's website about the problems going on in New Orleans with the public defenders there, and how the PD's office there is actually turning away people A, because of the funding, and B, because they're just overloaded.
Well, I actually wrote a letter to the Louisiana Public Defense Board about that, talking about how like funding this is not an option, and I was just practicing in a third world country that recognized that. You know?
Right, and I mean, that's what amazes me. Here you are in a third world country where literally the entire island can get shut down due to water giving you pink eye, and we can't figure out on mainland United States soil how to properly fund a public, defender system in a major U.S. city.
Absolutely.
It's appalling.
And that's what I was saying in this letter too, was also like, we had 4 public defenders in that office. We got budget expansions in that office in a tiny nation that desperately was in horrible budget shortfalls, because they recognized how important this is. This is constitutionally mandated. You don't get to just eliminate this. This isn't a luxury. This isn't a frivolity, And I mean, like, some tiny little country recognizes that, but you don't? That's ridiculous.
And speaking of budget shortfalls, one of the reasons the Houston Crime Lab, not AKA formerly known as Houston Crime Lab, they said they didn't have enough, they couldn't test all the rape kits because they didn't have enough money. And now they have enough money, and now we're seeing another backlog. And it just seems like it always comes down to this money issue. And if halfway across the world, you got a third world country saying, hey, we got enough money to do this. Houston, Texas should be able to do this.
Well, Brent alluded to it earlier. They're understaffed at the Forensic Science Center.
I gotta ask.
But again, Allison was understaffed, and she still made it work.
Exactly.
And that's the thing, is it really just comes down to a desire to do good. Allison went in there, it sounds like, with the desire to do good. She convinced others the importance of doing good. With the Houston Forensic Science Center, it's just about changing attitudes and changing mentality about things, so that people understand that, look, these are fundamental human rights that are involved. This is how we're going to be remembered as a society, and we need to do more. We need to do more to protect individuals' liberties, their rights, their freedoms. It just benefits society as a whole. And if we're going to start turning our back on indigent individuals in a large city like New Orleans, what's going to happen next? It's just going to keep going on and on and on. So, like I said, again, it's commendable what you did in Palau, and it sounds like it was a great experience. And it's nice that in a small environment like that, you can go in and you can change mindsets and you can change attitudes. And I think as long as we continue to do that and bring to the public the problems that exist, as more and more people care, I think we might start to see some change, but there still needs a lot more to be done. So
I couldn't have ended this show on a better note myself. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are wrapping up for the night. Brent Mayr, appreciate you coming on.
thank you very much.
You're going to have to give me the tip on how to keep the 5 o'clock shadow going like that. I can't seem to master it. Allison Jackson, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Such a pleasure.
It was very, very interesting to learn all about that. JV?
Another week
down.
for the books.
We didn't get to some of the stuff we wanted to talk about.
I know, and I still have a ton of questions on the DWI cases that were messed up. So it was more than 3?
Oh, there's going to be a lot more. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg, I imagine. The real problem, again, is that they came down with this. They criticized this months ago. It's still happening. It's going to affect more and more cases. I think you're going to see a lot more developing as a result of this.
And that's all the time we got, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on another week of Reasonable Doubt. We'll be back next week with some more great guests and some more great stories. Have a great night.